Hi everyone, welcome back to my video. So in this video, we're going to be going over functions. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my new file. So the last video was on modulus and floor division. So now I'm going to make a new file, which is functions.python. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a bit bigger because it's quite small. Okay, so the first thing we're going to go over is how to create a function, right? So, okay, I'm sorry. So how a function is created is there are a few parts to it. So the first part we're going to be going over is how to declare a function. Then how the different types of function. And finally, we're going to go over why functions are useful. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is let's go over how to declare a function. So in a function in Python, there are a few parts to it. The first one is called the function definition. And the second part is called the function call. So Python is usually pretty self-explanatory. What we mean by function definition is it's giving the function what it needs to do. So to define a function, you always need to use the keyword def. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Like you can't declare a function without the keyword def. So then you can define a function, say add. And this area, this is going to be the name of your function. The parenthesis is what hosts your arguments, which we'll get into later when we go over the types of functions. Then to make or to provide the definition for the function, you need to put a colon. Then click enter and you can type your function. But remember, so let's go over a few basic things, right? In a function definition, you must have the keyword def, right? So that's abbreviated for define. And the function and the definition must end with colon. So now let's move on to actually defining the function, right? So remember in Python, indentation is very important. So notice how when I click here, it just takes me to the beginning of line 9. If I were to type in my code here, it would give me an error because Python identifies different blocks of code through indentation. So make sure to properly indent your code by hitting tab. So then what you're going to do is we're going to define a few variables. Say I is equal to 20, j is equal to 30, and k is equal to I plus j. And then we're going to return k. So, but basically there are a few things here. First, make sure I went over this in a previous video, but quick reminder, single equal is assigning a value to the variable. And then what we're going to do in the returning basically is the output, returns or gives the output, but doesn't display it. Console log. It doesn't display it in the console log. Okay, so that's what return function. So this is your basic function definition. So what's a function call, right? The function call is when you actually tell the function to run, or I define a function. So this is like giving you giving instruction to somebody else. So say you in your mind decided that you wanted to tell the other person to go get you a plastic water bottle, which you shouldn't be doing because you should be recycling. Well, plastic water bottles aren't the best for the environment, but still, let's assume you wanted them to get you a plastic instead of a steel water bottle. That's your function definition. That's what the function you're going to tell them to do. However, you haven't actually told them yet. It's still in your mind. So when you want to make the function run, you have to tell the person, go get me a plastic water bottle. That's what the function call is. So you can say add, and that's your function call. So basically, gives the instruction to run. Okay? So this is the basic function, how to declare a function and call it. Forgot to put that here. Okay. So now let's go over the different types of functions. So similar to Java, Python has 4 types of functions. So the first, so we're just going to basically make a multi-line comment. So the first type is with argument, arguments, and with return type. Second one, without arguments. Excuse me. Sorry, I just sneezed. And with return type. Then the third one, with arguments and without return type. And finally, without arguments and without return type. So basically, I just threw a bunch of words at you guys. So let's try and start defining all of them, right? So the first word we're going to try and define is argument. So an argument is basically the input into a function. So we'll look at more examples. So then the second term we're going to define are return type. So remember, a return type is basically the data type of whatever value a function returns. Remember, key here is that there is no void in Python. So it's just no return type. If there's a void return type, like in Java, it's just going to be no return type in Python. So then what we're going to do is let's just start off by writing an example of each function. So let's call the first function with arguments and with return type 1 function. So how we define that is, remember, keyword def, and say let's continue. Actually, what we can do is we're going to continue with the basic arithmetic operations, right? Since we already used add, let's go with multiplication. So I'm going to abbreviate as mult. And we want arguments, right? So that's the input you put into the function. So since we're still writing the function definition, we're going to use 2 placeholder variables, which will take the place when values are assigned in the function call. So we'll get more into what that means. But the placeholder variables that I'm going to be using are x, y. Remember, these are going to be substituted with actual values. So mult x, y, say we'll assign print, or actually we want a return type. So basically what we do is we'll have to type return, because without returning a value, it's not going to have a return type. So the return type will say x times y. So this function has two arguments. X comma y, right? And then it returns the value of x comma y. So we'll see what value that is, or what return type it returns. And that can be determined by what goes in the function call. So say we have mult, we have to type in two numbers. But you may notice that we haven't actually assigned the variables x and y a value, like int or double, right? And that's because variables in Python are dynamic. They can adapt to the type of variable. Like if you say you assign double or 5.7, and you use the type function to find the variable, what data type it is, it's going to return double for you. Or say in the same function, you enter 5 times 10, it's going to return int. So it can tell what it is. You don't have to, it's not user defined. You don't have to user define it. It's predefined by the program, which is really special about Python. And so say I'll write 10 comma 15, right? And when I run it, it's not going to give any output simply because we haven't given it a way for it to print. So what you're going to do is you're going to type in print mult 10 comma 15, and I can just delete this here because yeah, there we go. And we get 150. So say we want to find out what the data type is, right? Because we said that there was a return type. So what we're going to find, how we're going to find that is print type mult 10 comma 15. So basically what type does is it prints the data type of the function. So see how it says class int? That's what your return type is for this function. So now let's look at type 2 functions. Since majority of the heavy lifting explanation is done with this example, we can just go over it briefly. So now let's go on to division. Div. And the second type is without arguments, but with a return type. So we'll just have no arguments because no placeholder variables means no arguments. And we can say type return. Actually, we'll define a few global variables. Say x is equal to 6 and y is equal to 7.5. And say return x times y. So let's take a quick guess of what the return type of the function will be. So if you guessed double, you'd be correct. So let's just make sure we're correct, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to type print div, and then we're going to write print type div parenthesis. Make sure you put your parenthesis correctly. So you notice how it says, oh, 4.50, and it's class float. So my bad, I said double, and that is incorrect. The data type is float. So we'll be getting more into data types later on, but for now, you should know that this is double, not float. I'm so sorry about that. Okay, so now let's go over type 3 functions. So that is without arguments, or with arguments and without return type. So the first thing you're going to do is type def, okay, what's left? Subtraction. So we're going to type in subtract x comma y, say that's our arguments, right? Oops, and I forgot a column there. Notice how it keeps giving me errors. It's going to keep giving you errors, and you should be adjusting your code based on that. So we'll say, and we don't want a return type. So we can just print in the function because the function print does not have a return type. So in Java, it would be considered a void return type. So print x minus y. So now let's just try working and see how it works, right? So sub 6 comma 8, let's say something like that. And print type sub 6,8. Let's run this. And notice how it says return type none. So that's because, again, print has no return type. So finally, the last one is no arguments and no return type. So let's finish off the video strong. Type 4 functions. So let's see if you guys can write a quick code about this. I'll give you a few seconds, pause the video if you need to. Okay, so I'm hoping that you've written your code. Let's take a look at an example. Def or division, right? And that one is without arguments and without return type. So we'll declare a few variables inside. Let's say 6. And then let's make y, let's see, 4. Okay. And we'll say print x for division y. And then we'll run the code. So I want you to take a minute to understand why this is going to return a no return type and why it has no arguments. So we have no arguments here in the parentheses. That's why it's going to be no arguments. And since we're printing and the function print has no return type, we're not returning anything. We haven't used the keyword return. It's going to have a null return type or a none return type. So for division, and let's just make sure print alrighty. See, it says the rounds down to 1 and there's no. The return type is none. So now let's go over why functions are so useful, right? Notice how it can be used as a general template for a specific case. So it helps you reduce the amount of recursive, like the amount of repetitiveness in your code. That's why functions are so important. So I hope you found the video useful. I'm sorry it was a bit long. I'll work on condensing that in the future. And that's some consistent feedback I've gotten. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, anything, please feel free to ask in the comments, in my email, anything. Thank you so much. Bye.